Welcome to Citizen Impact, a project of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council. I'm the host, Logan Martinez. We have a very exciting show today. We're going to be covering Good Sam and the crisis in the Middle East. It's been 2 years now since they announced the closure of Good Sam, and the Dayton community has suffered greatly because of it. The Full Employment Council was out picketing, and while unemployment is low, the Full Employment Council has joined nationally for the job guarantee movement. We believe that everybody should be guaranteed a job. We should have full employment. And so that would go a long way to solve a lot of the problems in our society. We have two guests who have been working on the Good Sam situation for several years. Nancy Kiehl, thanks for coming over.
Thank you.
And Reverend Merritt Worthen,
Yes.
who has been working on it here. And it's a big tragedy, you know, out of the blue with no information ahead of time. Premier Health announced that they were going to close Good Sam, major hospital in the northwest Dayton area. Literally tens of thousands of people depend on it for services, and particularly the black community, but also lots of white folks, you know, had gone there for years. And so it was a hospital, and its closure, you know, because they weren't making enough money, and it's a nonprofit.
Yes.
And it really was a sucker punch for the people of Dayton.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So could you give us a little outline of how this went down and what's been going on over the last 2 years?
Well, like you said, it caught the community by surprise. Good Samaritan has been a staple in the community, and as money has been divested from Northwest Dayton, and as you look at all of the closures of businesses and restaurants and foreclosures going on, the last thing there was health care. And so we saw such investment in Good Sam, and Good Sam reaching out to the community. It caught us by such surprise, and we didn't understand why even announce the closure, two, why do it so quickly without preparing. And so members of the community, clergy, churches, civic leaders gathered together to protest. And we told Premier then there would be loss of lives. Health care would decline further than it already was. In a neighborhood that is 75 to 85% minority populated, high elderly population, low income neighborhood, and a lot of violence in this neighborhood. So trauma care is needed. To close this hospital is basically the final death sentence for this neighborhood to allow that to happen. So that's when the Clergy Community Coalition was formed. President Rodney Carter has been leading us for the last year and a half, over a year and a half. He's been with us for 2 years. And we've gathered together and we protest, and we've been fighting against this closure since that time.
Okay, now they just in the last couple months started to tear it down. We have some video, but can we show the video? But it's really heartbreaking to see the destruction of, you know, and some of these buildings that they're tearing down were just built.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Just paid for. I mean, I don't know if they're even paid for, but it is a big loss to the community and for Dayton. And they are running these commercials that really irks me. That they had a slogan, in your community or something like that.
Healthcare in your community, and we're there for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And we say, except for in West Dayton.
Right.
That's pretty much how we always add to whatever the premier's.
Yeah.
Well, they're spending millions of dollars on television. I mean, literally, it's just advertising that they're trying to make up for all the bad public relations they've gotten as a result of this.
And they're willing to invest in anything that they can in the black community to show that they care about the community, while saying, but we won't provide health care or allow it to be provided in this area.
Yeah, that's the stickler. They don't want another hospital to be built where they're tearing this one down.
Right. They'll give us a barbershop maybe, or
Oh, yeah, test your blood pressure in the barber shop.
That's right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, they were having protests every Friday for a long time.
Still ongoing.
You still have every Friday, and are you still switching between Good Sam and
Premier Health Partners downtown.
Okay,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
do you ever? For a while we were picketing Miami Valley. Have you stopped doing Miami Valley for the time being?
We just wanted to go back into the neighborhood over by Good Samaritan Hospital, and we've had such a huge response. We have a sign that says "Honk for Healthcare," and people just blow their horns through that intersection at Philadelphia and Salem when we're there on those Fridays. So there's definitely a need in the community to know that there are people that are still working on it, and we have been working diligently on it for the last few years. So,
Oh yeah, I know that there's been a number of big things. You had the federal government come in and take testimony. We've had several demonstrations of, big turnout and stuff. Back to this decision-making process. I mean, it was totally out of the blue, though they had been thinking about it behind closed doors and planning it for some time.
yes,
We know that they had gotten Good Sam it was owned by a Catholic
Health Initiative.
Catholic Health Initiative.
Right.
And part of the deal in tearing down the building was because they had got Good Sam from them, they got, I think, like 18 or 20% of Premier Health. Now they own, and it's a nonprofit, so
Right.
what does it mean to own part of a nonprofit?
Well, they're getting operating revenue from Premier Health. So Catholic Health Initiatives is getting 22% operating revenue.
So it's 22%.
Right.
They got bought off for 22%.
Right. And so we don't exactly know how that's calibrated. We think if it's anywhere between $100 million and $300 million that deal was involved for the
How much it's worth.
right.
Now they're the largest Catholic healthcare system in the whole country.
Well, Catholic Health Initiatives just last year in 2019 merged with Divinity Healthcare Network, and they became Common Spirit, which is now the largest nonprofit healthcare system in the United States.
Now they own St. Leonard's, I believe.
I'm not
I'm
familiar.
pretty sure they do.
Yeah.
Which is right here in Dayton too. But they made this deal behind closed doors that supposedly even some of their own board members didn't even know about it, but certainly the management did.
Right.
And, this is what we call institutionalized racism.
yes,
That when you make an institution that's healthcare, that's providing healthcare for low-income minorities, and like I said, there's one of the things that I want to emphasize is that a lot of white folks that still live in that neighborhood and go to that hospital, and so, but because it's such an impact on the African American community, it's institutionalized racism.
yes,
And so they made that decision behind closed doors, knowing that impact. At the same time, they're expanding throughout the whole valley, building facilities, and they also own part of the fairgrounds, right? Aren't
Premier
they?
does, absolutely,
Yes.
yeah.
So that's a financial investment. So they're somewhere quasi for-profit institution now.
Right, absolutely.
Well, that's why we're alleging racism, because they're a nonprofit, multi-billion-dollar nonprofit that doesn't pay taxes, that's located in a hospital that the Sisters of Charity originally opened this hospital for the purpose of being there for the neighborhood. At that time, it wasn't all minority, but they did have an attention to the homeless, and they wanted to be sure everybody was taken care of. The Sisters of Charity made sure that if it was ever bought by someone else, if it was not going to be a healthcare facility, that it would revert back to the Sisters of Charity. But we know that now the Premier has bought it. They've said that it cannot be a healthcare facility. So it goes against the entire reason that this hospital was created to start with.
Yeah, and it hits low-income people,
Yes.
which the Sisters of Charity was focused. Now,
We're
Yes.
servicing, yeah.
now, I was born at St. Elizabeth, which was the other
Yes.
hospital. So we've lost 2 of these Catholic hospitals, both in the low-income minority communities.
Yeah.
Both on the west side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now we have this, and I know that they said, well, everybody can come over to Miami Valley, but the people who were expecting children, they had to go to the suburbs. They couldn't go to Miami Valley if you were in there, even though Miami Valley has more babies than anybody. But if you were at Good Sam, they had to transfer you to their suburban baby unit.
Right.
So one of the odd things, also, none of the people that worked there supposedly lost their jobs. I know that some people were phased out, and I'm not sure about how many, but they're expanding so much outside the city that they had to borrow money, that they're actually going in debt for bonds through the county.
Well, the bonds was a whole other issue. The bonds that were issued were hospital revenue bonds, and those were issued to consolidate their debt. And they used $380 million of that, of $590 million that were authorized by Montgomery County. So there was a remaining $200 million that they've frozen and said that they're not going to be using. And that was something that the Clergy Community Coalition protested once we found out that there existed this huge amount of money that was going to be used for consolidating their debt. We just said that this flew against the Ohio Revised Code, which was to guarantee that any hospital bonds had to be used to not serve any organization that was discriminatory, and that's what we are alleging Premier is, discriminatory. And so by not using, or by using this money, they are not using any of the money in African American communities. There's no hospitals being built in African American communities, just in predominantly affluent white communities is what we found.
So they consolidated their debt, and they issued these are, what are these bonds called?
Hospital revenue bonds.
Hospital revenue bonds, and they had to be, the county commissioners had to sign off on it.
Exactly.
So they are complicit in this, and they used $300 million of it to
Consolidate
their
their debt.
debts. Now that debt is probably in part for tearing down the hospital, building all these other places, building all their other hospitals and other facilities, and probably for paying for the fairgrounds.
I don't think so. I don't think that that's part of it. But
Where did they get the money to pay for the fairgrounds?
well, that took place. That was $5 million, and that was a couple of years ago. I think that
Sure, but they probably had that in cash.
Well,
petty
they
cash.
are $1.7 billion in revenue in 2018 is what Premier had. $1.7 billion in revenue.
$1.7 billion.
Right.
They've got plenty of money to do whatever they want to do.
And Premier has 60 tax-exempt properties in the Dayton area, in Montgomery County, and in the surrounding counties. But they have 200 taxed properties, and Montgomery County Fairgrounds would be a taxed property. So they are purchasing land all over the place, and that's what these nonprofits do to cloak their
They're profiting.
they're profiting, exactly, is they purchase a lot of land. And so they have 200 taxed properties.
Now, the cost of healthcare, the United States pays more for healthcare than anyone in the whole world per capita.
Absolutely.
Like way more than the nearest person, and yet we don't have healthcare for everyone.
No, we don't.
We have 40 million people that have no healthcare, and the biggest cause of foreclosures and personal bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare.
Absolutely.
And so these, one of the things, we have all these in Montgomery County and in Dayton, we have 8,000 boarded up houses. Not boarded up, but they're vacant.
Yes.
8,000 vacant houses, and a large number of those are due to health care expenses.
Right.
And if you look around what children's hospitals buying, what they bought up at Good Sam, what they bought around Miami Valley, they're low-income housing that they're those properties. They've taken the healthcare money that they're making and investing it
Right.
in the community, and of course they funnel it off to the contractors, the banks. They pay themselves pretty well.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And they've cannibalized their own. Well, when they talk about losing money in Good Samaritan Hospital, Good Samaritan not being profitable is something that only happened after it was purchased by Premier.
Right.
And so they began to divert patients to other Premier hospitals. So they created their own problem as they built in the suburbs and directed as much as they could to the suburbs. Of course, you're going to begin to have empty beds. And then there's your argument for closing this hospital in an urban area of Dayton where there's high Medicare and Medicaid, and they want to have clients, patients who have the best health care possible, so they can make as much money as possible. So they don't care about people who don't have insurance or have insurance that doesn't pay them what some of the prime insurance companies will pay.
So they dismantled the hospital to justify tearing it down.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
it's not like we didn't stop needing health care there.
Right.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Good Sam was a trauma 2 hospital up until I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and then they moved that trauma center out of it, and they moved. They just started moving things out 4 or 5 years ago. So it has been, once they did get to the point of announcing, and then they could use all these different numbers. They'd already had this whole thing in the pipeline to cannibalize, as you said. Yeah.
Now they have so much money, even though I know the city was very upset with them when they first heard about it, but they have so much money that they're spreading it around. I know they've promised
Yes, they are.
10 million of their 1.7 billion. Is that what it is?
1.7 billion, right.
10 million of that they're going to put back into the Good Sam Salem Avenue area.
Right.
As long as it's not health care.
Yeah, now they have that's the big stipulation. You can't put any kind of health care on the property or use their money for health care.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, they call that the deed restriction, and it's actually illegal. I mean, it's propagated by Premier to make other buyers think that they can't put health care there, but really it would not hold up in a court of law.
so the main goal of the coalition now is to get a new hospital in the
Yes.
city of Dayton.
Absolutely.
Yes. If not at that Salem and Philadelphia site, somewhere in one of the many foreclosed, vacant areas that there are in Northwest Dayton. But we would like it to be there at Salem and
Absolutely.
Philadelphia.
So it's unlikely that Premier Health is going to agree to help do that unless somehow you
Enough pressure.
Well,
put a tremendous amount of pressure and get, some people standing up. I mean, we had really nice demonstrations. We had support. There's actually a large number of people that really can see through. I mean, there's people that have blinders over the eyes, and whatever the rich do, it's fine with them, as long as it's not their health care.
Right.
right, exactly.
But we have the pending federal complaint with the Office of Health and Human Services. That's been pending since April, May of 2018. And so we had investigators that came in, and we brought in over 200 people to give testimonials as to the impact of the closure of the hospital. So while that is running in the background, while Premier likes to seem like everything's okay, they know that complaint is pending. And we know of people who are impacted adversely, severely. My cousin, in fact, was one of the people that was diverted after Good Sam was closed, was diverted to Miami Valley North with a heart issue. Never had heart pains at all. They took him to Miami Valley North, which is not prepared for the trauma. So then they said, we can't handle him. We need to take him to Miami Valley the main Miami Valley campus, go past Grandview because they won't release a trauma patient. 2 hours later, because he coded so many times in the ambulance, my family beat them there to Miami Valley. He was pronounced dead at Miami Valley. If he had gone straight to, say, Grandview, maybe he would have had a chance. But like you said, Trauma 1 Hospital is Miami Valley. But because of the neighborhood he was in, they sent him to what was Good Sam North, now Miami Valley North. And they have been doing that with other patients with same trauma level that they are unable to handle. And then wash their hands for these people that are dying with no explanation.
Outrageous. And so it's your cousin. I've heard about that case and stuff.
Yes, and the testimonial that you have, his sisters are on that testimonial.
Well, yeah, we'll show that here in a minute. But it's just glaring example of, and he was close to where Good Sam was because he could have maybe gone directly to Good Sam if that.
Yes.
Exactly.
He was in Trotwood staying with his sister at the time
Absolutely,
when it
yeah.
happened. And they debated where to send him. And after they debated it, they took him to Miami Valley North. And they did what they could, and they just said they didn't have the technology, the resources to handle that sort of trauma. And again, like I said, would not release him to Grandview. And so him coding along the way, whatever happened along the way, by the time he got to Miami Valley, 2 hours later,
And
they
how old
pronounced
was
him
he?
dead. 57, 58.
Yeah.
Healthy man in general.
Yeah.
No heart issues.
Premier North is really a holding place for a lot of movement down to Miami Valley, because the emergency room, what we're learning, it has always been consistently overwhelmed since the closure of Good Samaritan Hospital.
Which the one at
At Miami Valley, where there's the Trauma 1.
Yeah.
So he was diverted north but it's basically a holding place. They put folks into beds, and then they will transport them down to Miami Valley once they're ready.
We heard people that they are driving around in an ambulance holding people.
Absolutely.
Before they take them to Miami
Absolutely.
Valley. So what is Good Sam? Is it trauma?
It was Trauma 2.
It's a Trauma 2, and Good Sam had been, and Grandview. What is Grandview?
Grandview is now Trauma 3.
Trauma 3. So it's
But I think that they're slowly moving up. But there was a $25 million reinvestment in Grandview after the closure of Good Samaritan Hospital, and so it takes a lot for a hospital to become Trauma 1. But right now, at this point, Grandview is Trauma 3. Yeah.
Okay, and so Miami Valley is our only Trauma 1 here
In the Valley.
In the Valley.
Yeah.
So, how, the federal, do we have any idea when the federal folks are going to make a ruling or any decision from them? Do we have any timeline on that?
Well, as we've looked at the averages, as our attorneys have looked at the averages, it could be anywhere from 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And they don't have to report back to us necessarily their progress. So we have no idea how long this would take. We know we're under an administration that does not care a lot about the minority population. But nonetheless, we're giving every piece of information that we have to the investigators to plead this case. If you look at the amount of money that Premier has put into other areas of the city with less population, less minority, we've got so many hospitals south, it's ridiculous. So when you consider, when you look at it just by the numbers, there's no way that you cannot see this as racism, which goes against the Ohio Revised Code, Civil Rights Act, which is what we have alleged in our complaint. And so we'll take the time that they need to take in order to be sure that they get the ruling that they need. But Premier keeps pressing on as if that complaint doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Your strategy still is to mobilize the community and to put maximum pressure
Yes.
on Premier Health, but also the county.
We're at the
Absolutely.
weekly county meetings, at the weekly city meetings.
Right.
And so, do you have any allies that are elected here that are saying, I'm with you on getting a new hospital?
Well, politics are, some people will stand with you one day and then they'll stand with somebody else the next day. We thought Mayor Whaley was with us until we saw her fundraiser with Mary Busalis, who was with Premier, now all of a sudden helping her with her campaign, funding her. So there are people that have stood with us. I mean, the county says that, we met with members of the county that said it was unfortunate they didn't support this. So that's why we're asking, if you really support us, where's the money to go for a new hospital? That's what it comes down to. We don't need lip service. We do have people that say this was unfortunate, and yes, we're with you, and they'll say that in a room with us, and they'll tell us how terrible it is. But when it comes down to it, we're saying now that the hospital's closed, we need a new one, and we need everybody who has money to put it to the table to create this hospital. And so until we have that money, we can't say for sure who's with us.
Yeah.
But we've had Jim Butler who introduced
House Bill 780, and
Sure.
that was excellent when he and Representative Fred Strayhorn they did their press conference and they discussed this bill that was about hospitals not being able to that had to offer closed hospitals to other operators. And if that hospital entity would not offer their hospital for sale, then they would lose their nonprofit status for 20 years. And it was an excellent bill, but it was pretty much dead in the water because it was presented in December, and in January you have to rewrite all the bills again.
Sure.
So
Well,
it's hard.
They're not, they've been closing hospitals. They're closing one in Cleveland. They closed one in Cleveland.
Right.
Yes.
They've closed, I think, one in Columbus, and they're talking about closing one in Toledo, maybe.
Well, there are some communities where there have been success stories. I mean, in Massillon, Ohio, Affinity Healthcare Center was announced their closure, and the mayor and the city commissioners, they rallied. They hired an outside law firm, and they were able to get a court injunction. And the same holds true in Cleveland. Mayor, I think it was Frank Jackson. He went up against the Cleveland Clinic and was successful. So there are stories, and the mayors rallied in those communities. However, and we've brought this to the attention of Mayor Whaley, that the necessity that we as a small citizen organization really can't come up with the funds to rally against a multinational corporation, and that the city can allot money to get an outside law firm to create a court injunction against what's happening over there. And especially with Premier stating that they have a deed restriction. I mean, it really...
Well, it sounds like they got $200 million that they could put $100 million into the new hospital. Of course, you're going to have to jump on them with both feet.
Well, that $200 million, our understanding, right? But our understanding with that $200 million is that that's just going to go away. It's a credit that's going to go away because they're not using it. They'd have to create a whole other plan.
Well, they could
but they could.
The county would
No,
have to sign
absolutely,
off on new bonds.
absolutely.
If they
Now,
want to get involved, they can.
Absolutely.
Our group's a big supporter of single-payer health care.
Sure.
If you're
Yeah.
familiar with that. And
Yes.
and the healthcare crisis. I mean, literally,
Yes.
it's estimated that 2 people a day die in Ohio for the lack of health care insurance or service because they delay, they
Yes.
die prematurely. We know that life expectancies
Yes.
for minorities and for, they've peaked. We've reached a peak, and not only for minorities, but I think for white men too.
Especially in Montgomery County.
And children, we have a mortality rate for babies here that's totally
I
way
think
off
we're
the wall.
fifth in Ohio. I want to say fifth in Ohio.
And this healthcare
The
crisis.
wrong way.
Exactly.
Infant mortality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have the healthcare industry, the insurance industry, the hospitals, the pharmaceutical companies, the banks that back them up are
Yes.
really the backbone of a for-profit, and it doesn't matter what happens to poor people or minorities.
Right.
Or even working people. Working people and middle-class people are paying out the yin yang,
Yes.
Absolutely.
And if you add that on to what they're trying to charge you to put your kids through college, it affects everybody. And so we really salute you, and let us know. We put your contact information in a Facebook page up here, but
Thank you.
what would you call on the people of Dayton to do to support your effort?
Write to their local politicians, continue to spread the word to anyone that they can, so that we could keep this, instead of Premier giving the narrative that this is all over and done and there's nothing to worry about, to keep raising awareness and hold our elected officials accountable until they step forward and make a difference.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Come to the city commissioner meetings, come to the county commissioner meetings, and speak your piece, and that's what we've been doing. We try to make it so that they don't forget about us.
Now we have your contact information. Can we put that back up there? Your email and Facebook. But thanks so much, and keep plugging away at
Thank
it.
you.
Because
Thank
something's
you
going to
for-
give. They cannot do this and get away with it.
Right.
We cannot allow them. So
Right.
thank
People like you are making a difference. Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. So
Go ahead.
I was going to say the next, I think that you're going to be seeing the video for the federal investigators, some of the complaints.
Sure. We're going to have next. We're going to show right now the some of the interviews and some of the testimony that went to the investigators when some of the community people, and I think one of your relatives is going to start off speaking about your cousin that
Yes,
passed away.
his sisters at the beginning and his other sisters at the end.
The only option to move him to a full-fledged hospital that is equipped was to move him to Miami Valley, which was 30 minutes away. When they got him there, they said there was nothing they could do. It's horrible. It's a horrible act. It's an assault on our community. It's the way I feel. I mean, since when did a person's economic status determine the value of their life? I mean, our brother is dead because there's no hospital close enough that could assess what was going on with him. Perfectly healthy man, 58 years old, dead. Doctors, nurses, equipment, all of that makes a difference. And the people of West Dayton, Northwest Dayton, deserve it just as much as anybody in Oakwood, Centerville, all those other places. We want the same things. We're not asking for anything different here in this community. And for a Premier Network to block that is outrageous. Criminal. Criminal. If it's not against the law, it just should be.
It reaches just more than me and my family. It's the whole community. We need a hospital in the Black community. Please.
I'm losing the vision in my right eye. I won't be able to drive much longer. For me to be able to get to medical facilities for services that I need, I will have to have somebody else get me there. I live a block away from Good Sam, around the corner really. In fact, I can see it out of my bedroom window. They made the decision because their demographics had changed. They were found themselves in the middle of a African American, mostly lower income neighborhood, and for years they'd been trying to attract clients, patients, service, people who needed service from as far away as Brookville, and that wasn't working. Those people didn't want to come into the city, and in my estimation, that's why they closed. But in doing so, they then decided that our side of town was not worthy of their services.
When they first started talking about closing Good Sam, the young lady on the TV said it's only 6 minutes from our area to Miami Valley. And it struck me that 6 minutes could cost somebody their life. 2 years ago, I had congestive heart failure. The ambulance came and got me, and they was getting ready to take me to the valley. They got to the end of the curve, whether to turn to the right to go to the valley or left to go to Good Sam. By the time the man got down there, he said, she's not going to make it to the valley. Get her to Good Sam now. And when they got me there, they were waiting for me. They took me straight in. They started working on me. My blood pressure has shot up to 298 over 190. And it hit me when that lady said 6 minutes, I wouldn't have lived. To me, it felt like they was looking at what it would cost to keep the hospital open versus what it costs to save lives. Now, I don't think it's going to cost them that much as far as the money, because they wouldn't be opening all these little satellite offices around here in these different areas. And I don't think Premier Health is really looking at how many lives they may lose in those 6 minutes.
Oh, I've had to switch doctors. I even moved so I could be closer to a different hospital because I have health issues. I have kidney failure. And I liked everything being in one spot. And now everything's scattered out. Like I said, one of them's all the way in Springboro. And everywhere you go, it's like 30 minutes, an hour drive somewhere. And I don't drive.
It's like a dagger in the side. Why stop another facility from coming in if you don't want to operate there? Why deny a medical provider to be there? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I know it's about money. I mean, it goes back to civil rights, racism, and all of that. I mean, it just, we have to fight. There's no question about it. We can't just sit back and just let things happen. We have to have a voice and we have to be heard.
You know, most people are elderly. They don't drive, are scared to even call for an ambulance because you're scared you're going to get the bill, So they probably, even if they were in a circumstance that they were in a death or circumstance, they would probably try to drive themselves, rather than even call an ambulance. My brother, Tyrone Russell, recently passed away. Around Christmas. If Good Samaritan had been there, then they possibly could have saved my brother's life like they did 18 years ago when he was ran over by a driver.
Why wouldn't Premier allow another company to reopen Good Samaritan as a new hospital?
Money. I think it's all about the money. Because I don't know why you wouldn't. They'd rather tear it down than to see somebody come in and put a hospital there, a real hospital.
It's a great tragedy. They're tearing that down. Everybody that drives up and down Salem Avenue, you can see it coming down brick by brick. And it's a big loss to our community. We're going to move on to the other part of the headlines, the crisis in the Middle East. For the last 18 years, we've been at war in the Middle East. We're currently at war in 7 countries and are in the brink to go into war with Iran. And it could be a major thing in which hundreds of thousands of people could die, thousands of Americans could die. This is a serious situation, and we have a guest that's going to talk about the Middle East and lives here in Dayton, has been here for many years, Youssef Elzein.
Youssef Elzein.
Elzein. Thank you for coming on, Elzein.
Thank you.
You're from Lebanon, and Lebanon's actually having its own little crisis right now. They had a tri-strike where they were on strike, I think, for a couple of months.
Indeed, yeah.
That was last year, and then now there's a sort of the Arab Spring happening, in which a lot of young people are rising up. And Lebanon, for people who don't know, has been run by a coalition government. They had a very bloody civil war there, in which thousands and thousands of people died, and the United States, of course, was partially responsible for that civil war. And they pulled together a new coalition there. And we'll see what happens there, but I don't want to get into that. The people of the Middle East have really been an inspiration for the people of the world for years, but the United States just has made a bigger mess than ever out of the situation there. So could you tell us a little bit about your impression about like Iran, the situation in the Middle East?
No, thank you for having me here. Now, I'm not the expert on the subject, but I like to say if you put 5 Arab Americans or from the Middle East, each one will have their own opinion about the situation over there. We all, however, have a common reason to feel sorry for the people that are being lost for no reason, no specific reason in the Middle East. Like you mentioned, it started in Lebanon many years ago. I grew up during the Civil War, and that was one of the reasons I came to the country in 1980 to go to school. That's the same time the revolution in Iran was taking place. And because of the way I look and the close resemblance to Iranians, I got hammered by many vulgar language because people here thought that I'm from Iran, remembering the days of the hostage back then. Life's changed since then. I've been here for 40 years. I am part of this community since 1998 in Dayton.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Dayton is a welcoming city. Most of us here believe that we think that diversity is great.
I appreciate that. I didn't feel anything less for many years, and I'm proud to say I am an Arab American. Adopted this as my home. I have married with 2 beautiful kids. The unfortunate things, if you go back just not too long ago in 2011, the Arab Spring that you referred to before the show, we all hailed it as the great democracy to the Arab world. Look at what happened since 2011. Libya is destroyed. Tunisia saw, I think, 2-3 other presidents. Egypt is gone, back to the theocracy of dictatorship. But what happened to the Arab Spring? So what's happening now, I don't want to refer to it as Arab Spring. This is coming from people that are struggling. They are struggling economically, they are struggling mentally, they are struggling emotionally because of what we experience here in our country. The classes, we have rich and poor, and it looks like that gap keeps growing, and the lack of attention to the normal human beings like you and me appears to be taking the lead in causing the uprisals that is taking place, be it in Iran or in Lebanon these days, fighting for the rights of the normal human being, the one things that we've been fighting for many years here in the U.S. The economic discrimination is very visible, be it in Iran. You'll see the elite, even though we call it the revolutionary government, Islamic government, but yet there is the elite and there is the other people that struggles to live day by day. Lebanon has been going through the same thing for the last 2-3 months. It is caused by government that's not paying attention to the needs of the people. My wishful thought as a normal human being that care about other humans is for us to be a partner in this. a partner with the people, not a partner with the governments that have been abusive to their own population. My wishful thought is just like we witnessed the dramatic change with Vietnam and South Korea. Now they are one of our best allies, right? And those two countries caused America the worst ever losses. So there is hope. There is hope if we mean peace. There is hope for our government to reconcile.
So you talk about the division or the class, class exists here in the United States. We have a large, supposedly large middle class, so people feel, but they're feeling more and more the pinch, even with one of their own in the White House. They still are struggling to survive. And we have elites in all these countries. And what we're having these wars is, instead of like fighting really for freedom, like they claim that they're fighting for freedom, we've killed hundreds of thousands of people, and the military-industrial complex has gotten filthy rich, super rich, and working people have done the dying on both sides, and the rich in these countries, our biggest ally in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, which is a absolute monarchy, a dictatorship, and the people there are not free, or not even close to being free. Like they're allowing women to vote, some women not to vote, to drive. They're allowing some women to drive with permission from their husbands or whoever, but that's no substitute for real freedom. And so that's our biggest ally. So the notion that we're in the Middle East either defending ourselves or fighting for freedom is a lie.
Yeah, I mean, we need to value the human life. Which is more, we are compassionate people. The Americans are compassionate people. We have the reason to feel for others. And we can influence our decision makers to adopt a more harmonious policies towards the people of the world, regardless of their religion or their background. We are the sons and daughters of one supreme power, God, if we all believe in Him. So the matter that we sell destructive weapons and machines to our allies to use it against their people, that's a crime by itself. Yes, our military industry here in the States is gaining a lot of that, but yet we are demonizing the human life so much that nobody cares. I mean, Syria, just next door to Lebanon, they have over 4 million refugees. That's the size of 4 cities like Dayton. Imagine that they are living in shambles and
and 200,000 of them just got pushed over the border again.
Right, today.
Last couple of weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, today the news is not any better. So even the simplest tornado that we suffer here just last May, it caused lots of headaches, lots of issues to our population. Imagine that instead of a tornado, you have bombs falling over your head.
Every day.
Every day, be it from the Americans or the Russians or whoever they are. It is just a crime, in my opinion.
Sure.
And that's where we all hurt. And that's where I hope that if we become the people of the world that we claim we are, that peace will prevail.
Well, the American people, like you say, are good people. Most all of them, really, individually, doesn't mean anybody harm. We have a lot of bad apples, both at the bottom and at the top, a lot of bad apples. But the average American is for good, We've been at war now for 18 years, and people who are at least looking at it realize we're not really talking about freedom. They don't want to talk about oil there. I mean, the Americans and the British have had their hands on the oil for 100 years from the Middle East. I mean, we've been getting the oil from the Middle East for over 100 years. And they say, well, that has nothing to do with any of this. Just pay your gasoline and your fee and don't worry about where it comes from or the blood that's on it.
Yeah.
And they've manipulated the American people thinking that, well, we're the ones that have been harmed. And 9/11 was very bad and awful, but they used that to have a blank check to go to war.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad few years that have been since 2001, but reconciliation can happen. It's easy. If you have the will to live in peace, you can do it. We are at war, almost at war with Iran. Iran is not saying it's a good country or a bad country, but they didn't do harm to the people of America. We have our interests that we're protecting, so we went there just like you noted. But look at the other countries that did really harm to our country. Years passed, but then we are with them. We are helping them.
Well, we had a civil war in the United States. General Lee was responsible for killing more Americans than anybody. More Americans died in the Civil War than I think all our wars combined. And yet they have a plaque here in Montgomery County for General Lee, and the people that live down in that neighborhood don't want to take the plaque down. And so reconciliation, between humans is something that we have to have, whether it's between the North and the South, or between the Japanese and the Germans, or the Vietnamese, or Arab people. We are on this planet together, and we can't be killing each other. And a lot of Americans, unfortunately, are so easily, into hating people.
Yeah, and honestly, you don't know how similar we are, regardless of where we come from. We are just a human being that want to live and let live just like anybody else. We are compassionate people. We believe down deep in our heart that we can live together. We just need the effort from our decision makers, policy makers, to believe that. Right now they are driven by reasons. I don't know if you know about it, but I don't know really about it. But I don't think the policy will change. The policies are made, fabricated somewhere else, and it's like Monopoly or the game Risk. If you played Risk in the old days, who's going to conquer this piece of land?
It's driven by greed.
Most likely, yeah.
Driven by greed. Now, we have a couple events, and we're part of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council as part of the peace movement here. We really were the people in the community that, we could be at war for another 4 years unless people here decide that they're going to change, because it's not going to come from the top, it's going to come from below. But we have the Poor People's Campaign. We must do more tours coming to Dayton with Reverend Barber, who is very much into peace and social change. But they're going to be here April the 23rd. There'll be a fairly large march and a big rally, and we need people to spread the word about that with the Poor People's Campaign. And during that same week, if we could run up the next announcement, we're having a 72-hour strike for the planet, in which it's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And students went on strike back in September here, and all over the world, 7 million people went on strike, mainly students, but people are got to stand up for the planet, because we see whether it's the fires in Australia or the wild weather we have here or the pollution we have here, we can't just destroy the planet through the environment and war.
Definitely. That's more detrimental to our just living in this on this earth. And I watched the video on your Facebook that you posted. It's one of the two most unbelievable that people don't know about or don't care to know about.
What was that?
The global warming and the protecting Earth.
Yeah, people are waking up. I mean, Australia, they, you know,
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
the size of Ohio burnt. That's how much land burnt. The whole size of Ohio, that's how much, and 1 billion animals may have been killed. And the temperature was 115 degrees, totally dry, and just went up like a match. It had like 70 fires out of control just a week ago. And it's global warming, and people could stick their head in the sand, but the rest of us are going to have to wake up and do something about these wars and about the planet. Youssef, thank you very much for being on here. Good luck.
Thank you.
Welcome to, you know, we're into diversity and change here.
I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do. And if there's anything I can support you with, please reach out, and I'll make sure to spread the word.
Okay, well, there's going to be a lot going on here, and the community has to stand up and become an active citizen. Unemployment is down, like we say, but we're for a guaranteed job for everyone. We're for full employment, and we're for world peace and a clean environment. So,
good luck. Looking forward to helping you with the issues.
okay.